We are now on the 5th installment on my road to Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And yeah, I watched the 5th installment in the Mission Impossible film series, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. It is the sequel to the Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. I have already mentioned my thoughts on the previous 4 films. You can find that on my channel. It's fairly recent, and if not, you can just wait to the end of this video where I will put the playlist of the Mission Impossible films. So yeah, we are now on the 5th installment. I love Rogue Nation. To me, this film is comparable to Ghost Protocol in many ways, and in some aspects it does better than Ghost Protocol. And there are some things which Ghost Protocol does well as well, but I'm talking about this film, and there are certain aspects in this movie that are better than Ghost Protocol. Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt is fantastic in the film. He has immortalized Ethan Hunt. Whenever someone thinks of Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise is the name that pops into their mind. You can see his interaction with the team being much more natural in this film, and how he interacts with his team, how he forms a dynamic with the team, how he depends on his team. Everything is done fairly well, and you get to see more of Ethan Hunt's character here. Ghost Protocol had the famous Burj Khalifa scene, but Rogue Nation has 2 very important scenes and very prominent scenes, and I think these stunts are a bit more memorable than the Burj Khalifa. While I'm not diminishing Burj Khalifa at all, but we have 2 stunts. One is the introduction scene with the plane. You get to really see the plane take off, and that is actually Tom Cruise on an actual plane taking off. And regardless of what you think of him personally, you cannot deny his commitment to film. This man, he held his breath for 10 minutes underwater for that scene, for a particular scene here. You know the one I'm talking about, where he has to put the security card underwater. He had to learn how to control his breathing so that he could hold off. Like, this guy is in his 50s, in his early 50s, and he's he's doing stunts like this. He's doing military training. It's insane to me how dedicated he is to get these stunts right, and his refusal to use body double or CGI. And with that, you get to see the realism brought to the big screen. Never once will you ever feel doubt that, oh, that is a CGI plane, or this is done in a green screen, or it's just, you will never feel that, because it is real, and that is real stuff portrayed on screen. It's the same with the underwater. Like, it's a very long continuous shot of Ethan Hunt underwater. Basically, he has to switch the security card with Simon Pegg at Vault 108. One of the most tension-filled scenes in that movie. It's comparable to the first one when Ethan Hunt broke into the CIA headquarters Langley. Speaking of which, there are references to previous films as well, so I enjoyed that. Rebecca Ferguson as Ilsa Faust is a very cool addition to the team. I enjoyed her action scenes, and she also brought a bit of femininity to the role as well. What I mean by that is, like, there's a very good balance between the femininity and the action scenes. Like, she has a very good balance brought to the screen. At first I was worried that she would become another romantic interest, but thankfully that did not happen, so I'm glad for that. I like her action scenes. I like what she brings to the table. I like the sort of mystery that you have with her initially. If you're watching it for the first time, then there is a certain mystic element to it. Like, is she really helping Ethan Hunt, or is she, like, what is her motive? Who is she? You get, like, there's some mystery with her character if you're watching it for the first time. And I also like that she's very cool. Like, it's nice to watch her on screen. I liked her action scenes, the way she moves, and the way she contributes to the story. I enjoyed all of it. And Simon Pegg as Benji Dunn provides a very good balance between humor and drama. He does a fantastic performance in this, and I think, to me, of the Mission Impossible movies that I've watched so far, this is one of his stronger performances, because not only does he bring humor to the table, but he also does really well with dramatic roles. And I especially loved the scene where Simon Pegg had a bomb strapped to his chest, and how he interacts with Ethan Hunt. I love that scene. So much tension filled with barely milliseconds left. I enjoyed the tension filled scenes in this film. Alec Baldwin as Alan Hunley does a very fine job as the director of the CIA, who later becomes the IMF secretary. And I also like that he's very skeptical of the mission as well. Like he doesn't believe that the organization that Ethan Hunt has spent years searching for, he believes that they don't exist. And I like that contrast in thought and how they move forward with that. And I like how all of that is brought back by the climax. I felt like he does a very fine job. I liked his role in this film. Ving Rhames as Luther Stickle has a much better, bigger role in this than compared to Ghost Protocol, where he was essentially a cameo. I wanted more of him, and the scenes Luther has in this movie is really, really strong. And I like that he has a very protective nature for Ethan Hunt, almost like a father figure. His first interaction with Jeremy Renner, his first meeting with Jeremy Renner after IMF is again shut down. It's one of the more entertaining scenes because you see how much he cares for Ethan Hunt, and I enjoyed his scenes so much. He does a lot more work in this film than in the previous one, than in Ghost Protocol. And while this movie doesn't have the same polished look as Ghost Protocol, the cinematography is still fantastic. I enjoyed the action scenes. There's a very thrilling bike scene, and all of that was captured beautifully, and I felt like there was very, like, you could see what's going on. And I like how the scene ended. And there's one small thing that I want to add. It's a small desire of mine to see a crossover between Mission Impossible and the James Bond film, because the MI6 clearly exists in this film and James Bond is part of the MI6. So it would be fantastic. Like, it would be very interesting to see Ethan Hunt interact with James Bond, you know, them working together on a mission to defeat a common enemy. I just felt like that's something I wanted to share because that's what I thought when I was watching it for the first time, and I still remember that, so I felt like I should share it. It would be very interesting to see that interaction and how the mission would unfold, because both of them are very different personalities, so it would be very interesting to see how they would work together as a team. I also love the different locations the movie is set in. And now I'm getting to the negatives, and the biggest negative for me is the villain again, because Mission Impossible films have a very difficult time with creating a great villain or a great antagonist. I still think the most memorable one will be Philip Seymour Hoffman in Mission Impossible 3, but even then, as a character, I never found a single villain that was really good. And while Sean Harris as Solomon Lane has a much more defined motivation, like his motivation is much more established, you get to see why he's doing it, but it still felt like as a character I could never really accept him as this really great villain. While I appreciate what he does in the film, like there's a lot more to this villain than the previous film in Ghost Protocol, he was by far the weakest one in this film and is a very weak villain character-wise once more, despite being better than the one in Ghost Protocol. My only other negative would be Hermione Corfield as an IMF agent working at a record shop in London. She was there just to get killed, and I have no problem with that because that's what, you know, drives the movie forward. But I was really disappointed with the execution. Like, she's an IMF agent, and the way she was portrayed in the film made it feel like she was just a cameo and she was no longer needed in the scenes moving forward. I get that, but I felt like her death should have been much more cooler than what was given. Like, she was held hostage and then shot. I would have loved for her to put up a fight, at least, considering she is an IMF agent. At least show her fighting for survival and then failing. It didn't need to be long, just like a minute of a fight scene. Combat wise, the villain wasn't anything great. So it's just that she was held at gunpoint, she didn't even try to escape, and she just was like, she accepted her fate. It was very out of character for an IMF agent. I felt like they should at least put up a fight. And the thing is that it's a small scene. Like, it doesn't take up much of the film's time, but that is the scene that frustrated me the most. So I felt like that I wanted to discuss that. Those are the two major problems I have with the film. The next one isn't really a negative for me. It's a small wish that I had. I expected it, but it just didn't happen. It didn't affect my experience in any way, but I felt like I wanted to share it. Paula Patton as Agent Jane Carter. She was there in Ghost Protocol, and she was really good in that movie. I liked her action scenes, but she is not there in this film. And even Ethan Hunt's wife, Michelle Monaghan, as Julia Meade Hunt, neither of these characters are there in the film. I would have liked a cameo scene at bare minimum. At least Brad Bird at least give a damn and put her at the end, and this film didn't even acknowledge her existence, and that wouldn't happen until the next installment, Fallout, where she has a much bigger role there. But I kind of would have loved to see a little bit of a cameo, you know, similar to the Ghost Protocol where Ethan Hunt sees his wife again, something like that, you know, something different. And a scene with Paula Patton, you know, I would have loved for her to come back in this film and do something progresses the story, or at least a small cameo in which she helps Hunt or something like that. It's just a small desire I have. It's just something I expected when I watched it for the first time, you know, some sort of connection aside from verbal references. But again, as I stated before, it didn't affect my experience in any way. It's just something that I wished would happen. You know, I wanted it. It's fine. I'm not gonna knock off any points for that. It's just something that I wanted. So overall, I really enjoyed Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. It is a very fun film. It's very thrilling. Its tension is comparable to the first Mission Impossible, the 1996 Mission Impossible. It's still one of the best in franchise. There are aspects of Rogue Nation that are better than the Ghost Protocol. I loved the locations. Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, Rebecca Ferguson as Isla Faust, Ving Rhames as Luther Stickle, Alec Baldwin, and Simon Pegg. I enjoyed these characters. Even Jeremy Renner, I enjoyed what he brought to the table, and I like that we get to see more of Jeremy Renner. His character is expanded and is far more established now, and you get to see more of an established friendship between him and Ethan Hunt. I like that because it's like they're establishing a stronger bond through these missions, and I also like the missions that they had to go through. I like the inclusion of the Syndicate, although I kind of wish that the villain was a bit stronger, was written a bit stronger in my opinion, because that's the only down part. But aside from that, it is a very well-made action spy film, and this is the first of the Mission Impossible films to be directed by Christopher McQuarrie, and the later installments are also done by the same director. So I'm kind of interested to see what will happen in Reckoning Part 1 and 2, but as of now, it's a very enjoyable film. If you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend it. If anyone's asking me to recommend a Mission Impossible, this is definitely one that I would really highly recommend you watch it if you haven't already. You'll really enjoy it.
Girl, you shut me down and there's no witness. Got me in my feels, she would never listen. All the alcohol is in my liver. I guess I lost and you're the winner. Missing your touch, you were a good kisser. I was born a saint, but now I'm a sinner.